Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're all about wine appreciation,
Sounds delicious.
specifically glasses and bottles. We've got taças e garrafas.
That's glasses and bottles in Portuguese, right?
Exactly. Plus, we'll be using an excerpt on wine's history and how it all makes us feel. Ready to become a wine expert.
Let's dive in.
Okay, first things first. How long have people been enjoying wine?
Oh, wow. Way longer than you might think.
Oh, a couple hundred years.
Like 8,000 years.
Seriously.
Yeah. Evidence suggests that it all started in the Caucasus region. And that history, it's quite a journey.
8,000 years. I mean, that's before, well, pretty much everything.
It is. And, from there, it just spread
Yeah.
everywhere. Like in ancient Egypt, wine was like for royalty, pharaohs.
Wow. So not just anyone could have a glass back then.
It was a big deal, even used in like religious ceremonies. And they documented everything, hieroglyphics, tomb paintings, the whole winemaking process.
So it wasn't just a drink, it was part of their whole culture.
Exactly. Then there's ancient Greece. Wine was totally tied to their myths. Dionysus, the god of wine and parties,
Oh, I've heard of him.
it was a symbol of civilization for them. All their festivals and, what were they called? Symposia?
Symposia.
Yes. They'd have these gatherings, philosophical debates, drinking wine. It was a whole thing.
Sounds fun. Okay, so we've got ancient Egypt, we've got Greece. But did anyone else catch on? Did this love of wine, I mean, did it reach other parts of the world?
Oh, big time. The Roman Empire, they were key. They took what they learned from the Greeks and ran with it.
So like ancient wine influencers.
Kind of. They expanded winemaking throughout Europe, made it a cornerstone of, well, Western culture as we know it.
So from royalty to the philosophers to the Romans, wine has had quite the journey. What about like after the Roman Empire?
That's interesting. The Middle Ages, kind of a rough time, right? But monasteries became the protectors of wine.
Really? That's surprising.
They kept the tradition alive through some pretty chaotic times. It's amazing how wine has survived and thrived. It's been there through it all. Ancient rituals, modern celebrations, you name it.
And now here we are, thousands of years later, still enjoying that same drink.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Okay, so we know the drink has a rich history. But what about the tools? Like, how does the type of glass affect the wine? Can't I just use any old cup?
Well, you could, but you'd be missing out. The glass, it's not just a container. It shapes the whole sensory experience.
Oh, okay, so how does it do that?
The shape influences how those aromas are concentrated, how they're released. Like if you have white wine, a glass with a more closed mouth, it'll help trap those delicate smells. But a big, full-bodied red, you want a wider bowl, let those aromas breathe.
Makes sense. I've definitely noticed a difference, but I never knew why, so there's a science to it.
There is. It's about enhancing the experience, guiding your senses. And the material of the glass matters too.
Like glass versus plastic.
Well, no, not quite. Think crystal. Crystal is known for its clarity, brilliance, really lets you appreciate the wine's color. And the thin walls, they can actually enhance how you perceive those aromas.
I guess crystal is for those fancy occasions, so then just like regular glass for everyday drinking.
Exactly. More practical, durable. Then you have the stem. Holding it by the stem prevents your hand from warming up the wine. Important for those chilled whites, sparkling wines, those sorts of things. And size. That matters too.
Size, like how much fits on the glass?
Right. How much you serve, but also how much surface area is exposed to air. It all plays a role.
Wow, okay. There's a lot more to a wine glass than I realized. I'm gonna have to pay more attention. What about the bottle? I know there are tons of different types. Does the shape of the bottle really matter?
Oh, the bottle is a whole other story. It reflects tradition, innovation. Centuries of that. It's how we preserve those precious flavors.
So not just a container, but like part of the wine's whole journey.
Exactly. And, it's had its own evolution.
Oh, I'm curious. How did it all start? Did they always use glass?
Oh, no. Before glass, there were clay vessels, amphorae. They'd seal them with beeswax or resin. Can you imagine?
Wow, that's really old school.
It is. But the Romans, they were the ones who really started using glass bottles for wine.
The Romans, again, they were really ahead of their time. So were those bottles just like the ones we use now?
Not quite. Early glass bottles, they were fragile, expensive to make.
Yeah.
It wasn't until much later, the 17th century, that they really became the standard. That's when, glass making got better, and they invented the cork.
The cork. Ah, that little thing we usually just pull out and throw away.
But it changed everything. It sealed the bottle, but it also let a tiny bit of oxygen in. And that's key for aging, for developing those complex flavors.
So it's like the bottle is breathing.
In a way, yes.
Hmm.
And then different regions, they started developing their own bottle shapes.
I guess I just figured those shapes were just, I don't know, decorative, but there's actually a reason behind them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They reflect the characteristics of the wines,
Mm.
like the Bordeaux bottle, tall, slender, the
Well,
one
yeah, classic Cabernet Sauvignon.
often.
Yeah.
That shape, it helps with sediment, keeps the wine clear as it ages. Then there's the Burgundy bottle, wider, with those sloped shoulders.
I've always liked the look of those. Elegant.
They are. They're designed for like delicate Pinot Noirs, Chardonnays. The wider shape allows for a slower oxygenation, good for those subtle flavors.
I never knew that. So interesting. And of course, you can't forget champagne. That bottle's instantly recognizable.
Right. Thick walls, that punt at the bottom, it's built to withstand the pressure from all those bubbles.
I've definitely had a few bottles pop open a little too enthusiastically. What about the color of the glass? Some are green, some are clear, some even have a sort of amber color. What's the reason for all that?
You're right, the color matters too. Think of it as protection. Darker colors like green and amber, they block out UV rays.
Ah, like sunscreen for wine?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Protects the wine from light damage. Clear bottles, they're usually for wines you drink young. They don't need the same level of protection.
Okay, so everything about the bottle has a purpose. That's amazing. But what about that cork? Earlier, you said it helps with aging, but I'm curious, like, how exactly does it work?
Well, it seals the bottle, right, but it's not a perfect seal. It lets in just a tiny bit of oxygen, just enough for the wine to age properly.
So there's a science to it.
There is. But there are other types of closures these days, too.
Oh, really? Like what?
There are synthetic corks. They're more consistent, cheaper, but they don't breathe the same way. Then there are screw caps. They're great for keeping those fruity flavors in young wines.
But they don't have that classic romantic feel of a cork, right?
True. And then there are glass stoppers. They're pretty reusable, but they don't let any oxygen in at all.
So even the closure can impact how the wine ages.
Uh,
Wow. Okay, last question about bottles. Can you break down, like, the anatomy of a bottle for me, all the different parts?
Sure. At the top, you've got the mouth. That's where you pour from. Then the neck, connecting the mouth to the body of the bottle.
I'm picturing it. Okay, what else?
The shoulder, that's the curved part below the neck. It helps with sediment and how you decant the wine.
Interesting. So that shape isn't just for looks.
Nope, it's functional. Then the body, of course, that's where most of the wine hangs out. And finally, the base. That's for stability, and sometimes you have a punt.
Oh, right, that indentation on the bottom. I know that's important for champagne bottles, right?
Exactly. It makes the bottle stronger, helps it handle all that pressure.
Wow, I'm starting to see the bottle in a whole new light. It's really carefully designed.
It is. And it's all about protecting the wine, making sure it reaches you in the best possible condition.
I'm feeling way more knowledgeable about bottles now. I guess we should move on to the glasses again, those shapes we were talking about earlier.
Sounds good to me. Let's delve into those.
All right, let's talk glasses. We touched on it earlier, but I want to get into the nitty-gritty. Like, what are the parts of a wine glass, and why do they matter?
Well, you could think of a wine glass as this perfectly engineered tool.
Yeah,
Each part has a job to do.
like a tiny little wine tasting machine.
Exactly. You've got the base, that's for stability, obviously. The stem, that's so you don't warm up the wine with your hand. And then the star of the show, the bowl.
The bowl, or, as I learned earlier, the bojo.
Ah, yes, the bojo. And that's where all the magic happens.
So what's so special about the bowl? I mean, it just holds the wine, right?
It does, but it's more than that. The shape of the bowl, how big it is, even how thick the glass is, all of that affects how the wine interacts with the air.
Okay, so walk me through it. How does the shape of the bowl actually change the taste of the wine?
All right, imagine you're swirling the wine. The curve of the bowl, it directs those aromas up towards your nose. A wider bowl, it lets you swirl more, gets more oxygen in there, releases those big, bold aromas. Perfect for, like, a Cabernet.
So that's why those big round glasses are used for those types of wines.
Exactly. But then you have a narrower bowl. It's better for preserving delicate aromas, like a white wine or a lighter red.
It's like the bowl is shaping the way we smell the wine. I never thought about it like that. What about the size of the bowl? Does that matter too?
Oh, definitely. A bigger bowl means more surface area, which means the wine oxidizes faster, so it opens up quicker.
So all these little details, they all add up. I'm learning so much. What about the thickness of the bowl? Is that important too?
It can be. A thinner bowl, especially with crystal, is often seen as, higher quality. It feels more elegant when you sip.
Ah, okay. So it's a matter of both taste and, like, feel.
Exactly. And then we have the rim.
The rim, I mean, that's just the top of the glass, right? Does that even matter?
More than you'd think. It actually directs the flow of the wine, how it hits your tongue.
Seriously. So it's like a little wine slide.
Kind of. A thinner rim, it lets the wine flow smoothly. But sometimes you get those rolled rims, kind of a bead at the edge. Some people like that. But it can change how the wine feels in your mouth.
Okay, wow. The rim, the bowl, the shape, the size. It's a lot to think about. So how do I know which glass to use for which wine?
Well, that's the fun part. It's all about finding the right match, the glass that really makes the wine sing. Let's start with red wines. What are you in the mood for?
Hmm. Let's say a Cabernet Sauvignon. Something bold.
Perfect choice. For something like that, a Cabernet or a Merlot, really any full-bodied red, you'll want a Bordeaux glass.
Okay, the Bordeaux glass, I've seen those. They're the ones with the big bowls, right?
That's the one. That wider bowl and the slightly tapered rim, it's all designed to let those aromas open up and to smooth out those tannins.
Tannins, those are the things that make your mouth feel kind of dry, right?
You got it. So the glass actually helps make the wine taste smoother, more balanced.
Amazing. What about a lighter red, like a Pinot Noir?
For a Pinot, you'll want a Burgundy glass. It's got a larger bowl than the Bordeaux, but it's rounder, and that lets the wine breathe more, really brings out those delicate, fruity flavors.
It seems like each glass is designed to show off the best parts of the wine. What about those really old wines, the ones that need a lot of time to open up?
For those, you might want a Grand Cru glass. It's like a supersized Burgundy glass, gives the wine plenty of space to breathe.
Like a mansion for wine. Okay, reds, check. What about white wines?
White wines, there aren't quite as many specialized glasses, but there are still some good options. If you've got a Chardonnay, especially one that's been aged in oak, you'll want a Chardonnay glass.
So there's a Chardonnay glass, too. What does that one look like?
It's kind of a middle ground between the Bordeaux and the Burgundy. Helps to balance those rich, buttery flavors with the acidity.
Acidity, that's the tartness, right? The thing that makes your mouth pucker a bit.
You got it. Now for a Sauvignon Blanc, something crisp and refreshing, you'll want a Sauvignon Blanc glass. It's designed to highlight those zesty citrus notes.
I love Sauvignon Blanc. I need to get my hands on some of those glasses. What about Riesling? And that one's usually pretty aromatic, right?
It is. And for Riesling, you want a glass that can capture all those delicate floral and citrus aromas. So a Riesling glass is perfect. Smaller bowl, narrow rim.
It's like a whole new world is opening up to me. I'm starting to see why the glass really does make a difference. Okay, we've done reds, we've done whites. What about sparkling wine?
Sparkling wine. For that, you need a glass that can show off those beautiful bubbles. The classic choice is the flute.
The flute, yes. Those tall, skinny glasses, they do look elegant.
They do. And that narrow shape, it helps the bubbles last longer. But if you want to really experience the aromas of a sparkling wine, you might try a tulip glass.
A tulip glass? I haven't seen those before.
They're kind of a hybrid between a flute and a standard wine glass. You get the bubbles, but also a wider bowl to let those aromas develop.
Interesting. So the flute for the bubbles, the tulip for the aromas. Are there any other options for sparkling wine?
There's the coupe, but those are kind of old-fashioned now. They're pretty, but the bubbles disappear quickly.
So stick with the flute or the tulip. Got it.
Mm.
What about fortified wines like port or sherry?
Those are special cases. Port, you want a smaller glass, called a port glass. It helps concentrate those intense aromas. And for sherry, you'd use a copita.
A copita. Okay, I'm writing that down. What's special about the copita?
It's tall and narrow, kind of like a mini flute. It helps to capture those delicate, nutty flavors.
So even with fortified wines, the right glass makes a difference. It's okay, this has been amazing. But what if, I don't have all these different glasses. Is there one, all-purpose glass I can use?
There is. It's called a universal glass. It's not perfect for every wine, but it's a good compromise, especially if you're just starting out.
Okay, good to know. Are there any other, really specific glasses I should know about?
Well, there are glasses for rosé and ice wine, but honestly, those are more for, real wine geeks. You don't need to worry about those unless you're really serious about it.
This has been a crash course in wine glasses. I had no idea there was so much to learn. It really is a science.
It is, but it's a fun science.
Totally. Now, I think it's time to switch gears and talk about those bottles again. We covered a lot about their history and different shapes, but now I want to, really get to know them. What are all the parts of a bottle and what do they do?
All right, let's break it down.
Okay, I feel like we've covered so much in this deep dive, from ancient winemaking to modern glasses. I'm swirling with knowledge.
It has been quite the journey, hasn't it? We've explored the history, the science, the artistry behind appreciating wine.
I'm definitely going to look at wine in a whole new way after this. Before we wrap up, how about a quick recap, just to make sure all this new knowledge sinks in?
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. We talked about like where wine came from, right?
Oh, yeah. 8,000 years ago, the Caucasus region. Hard to believe people have been enjoying wine for that long.
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? And then we talked about how like the ancient Egyptians used it in their ceremonies and how the Greeks associated it with their gods.
Right. Wine was more than just a drink back then. It was woven into the fabric of their culture, their beliefs. It was a symbol of civilization for them.
And of course, we can't forget the Romans. They were kind of like the ancient wine ambassadors. They spread winemaking throughout Europe.
Exactly. They really helped to shape the way we think about wine today. Okay, then we fast forwarded to, well, modern times. We talked about how the type of glass you use can actually change the way wine tastes.
Yeah, I never realized how much the shape of the glass, the material, even the rim can affect the aromas and the flavors. I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to that from now on.
It makes a big difference. And then, of course, we had our deep dive into bottles, all those different shapes, the colors, the closures,
I used to think those were just for aesthetics, but now I know that every detail serves a purpose. It's all about protecting the wine, preserving those flavors.
and reflecting the traditions of different regions, too. You know, a Bordeaux bottle tells a different story than a Burgundy bottle.
Exactly. We even got into the anatomy of glasses and bottles. Who knew there were so many parts to consider? The base, the stem, the bowl, the shoulder, the neck. It's a whole world of its own.
It is. And then, of course, we talked about the art of wine tasting itself, how to engage all of our senses to really savor those flavors and aromas.
I learned that it's not just about drinking, it's about observing, smelling, analyzing, really experiencing the wine on a deeper level.
Exactly. It's a multi-sensory journey, and everyone's experience is going to be unique.
I feel like this deep dive has given me a whole new set of tools to appreciate wine, and I'm excited to put them to use.
Me too. What will you explore next in the world of wine?
Well, for starters, I'm going to invest in some proper wine glasses and maybe even a decanter.
Sounds like a great plan.
It's been an absolute pleasure learning from you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And to all of you listening, cheers to your next wine adventure. May it be filled with delicious discoveries and memorable moments. Until next time, keep swirling, sniffing, and savoring every sip.